My best friend's father began a campaign to ruin my life with a simple text message, and he almost succeeded. It started so innocently that I mistook his attention for kindness, a fatherly concern for my well-being. But over the course of a few months, that kindness curdled into something suffocating and predatory. It poisoned the one place I felt truly safe, my second home. And it ended with a late-night phone call that held the power to either restore my sanity or detonate my entire world. My best friend is Liam. We've been a unit since kindergarten, navigating everything from scraped knees on the playground to the existential dread of college applications. His house wasn't just a house, it was a sanctuary. It was the smell of freshly cut grass from the backyard, the glow of a video game on the giant basement TV, and the comfort of a fridge perpetually stocked with Dr. Pepper and leftover pizza. It was my haven. At the heart of that haven was Liam's dad, David. For most of my life, David was the quintessential cool dad. He was the one grilling burgers for us in the summer, laughing at our terrible jokes and treating me not like a guest, but like a second daughter. He had this easy, rumbling laugh, and a way of talking to you that made you feel like what you had to say was genuinely important. I never thought twice about him, other than to feel a pang of gratitude that my best friend had a father who didn't mind two teenagers taking over his house every weekend. But the architecture of our relationship began to shift about 3 months ago. The change was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. It started with text messages, usually when Liam was at soccer practice or out with his other friends. "Hey Anna, is Liam with you?" A perfectly normal question. I'd text back a no, and that would be it. Then the texts began arriving at odd hours, even when I knew for a fact Liam was home, probably just in the other room. "Hey kiddo, just thinking of you. Hope you had a good day." The first time I saw that, I smiled. It felt sweet, almost touching. I figured he was just a bit lonely. Liam was a senior, after all, getting ready to leave for college. Maybe his dad was just feeling the looming emptiness of the nest. I'd reply with something polite and think nothing more of it. Soon, the texts evolved into phone calls. I'd be in my room, wrestling with a calculus problem, and my phone would light up with his name. The conversations were always superficially light, but they started to feel strangely personal. He wouldn't just ask about school, he'd probe. He'd ask for my opinions on my teachers, my secret ambitions, what I thought made a person truly happy. It was a level of emotional inquiry that felt too intimate for a friend's dad. Still, I explained it away. I was always the responsible one, the good influence. Maybe he just saw me as a stable person to talk to, someone more mature than the other kids. The real turning point, the moment a cold knot of dread formed in the pit of my stomach, happened on a Tuesday night. It was nearly midnight, and the house was quiet. My phone vibrated on my nightstand, the screen casting an eerie glow on the ceiling. Seeing David flash across the screen sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. My first, immediate thought was that something had happened to Liam. My heart hammered against my ribs as I fumbled to answer. "Hello, David. Is everything okay?" His voice on the other end was different. It was slow and syrupy, stripped of his usual energetic, booming quality. "Oh, everything's just fine, Anna. I'm sorry, did I wake you?" No, it's okay," I stammered, sitting bolt upright in bed. "Is Liam all right?" There was a pregnant pause. I could hear the faint, canned laughter of a sitcom in the background. Liam's sound asleep. I was just up, couldn't turn my brain off, and, well, I started thinking about you. The words hung in the air, completely bewildering. "You thought of me." "I did," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "I was thinking about the way you handle yourself. You're so poised, not like the other girls your age. You have this old soul quality. It's very compelling." I was speechless. A hot, uncomfortable flush crept up my neck. "Oh, thank you, I guess. Are you seeing anyone right now? He asked, the question so direct and out of place that it felt like a slap. No, not really. Just trying to keep my grades up for college, I mumbled, my words feeling thick and clumsy in my mouth. That's a shame, he purred, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. A beautiful young woman like you shouldn't have to be alone. The conversation crawled on for another 10 minutes, a bizarre and deeply uncomfortable interrogation about my personal life. I gave clipped, one-word answers, desperate for it to end. When I finally managed to hang up, I stared at the dark ceiling, my mind racing. That wasn't normal. That wasn't a lonely dad making small talk. The way he had said "beautiful young woman" made my skin crawl. It felt possessive and deeply wrong. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. The late-night calls became a regular, dreaded fixture of my life. I started ignoring them, letting the calls go to voicemail, my heart pounding every time my phone rang. The messages he left were cloying and manipulative. Just wanted to hear your voice. Hope I didn't do anything to upset you. He then moved his campaign to social media, messaging me cheesy memes and articles with captions like, "This made me think of our chats." He was trying to weave himself into every corner of my life, and it felt like I was suffocating. I was desperate to tell Liam, but the words wouldn't form. How do you even begin that conversation? "Hey, Liam, I think your dad has a creepy fixation on me." He would look at me like I was insane. Or worse, like I was an arrogant narcissist making it all up. He adored his father. Accusing David of this felt like a betrayal of our friendship, a grenade I was too terrified to pull the pin on. So I stayed silent, burying the secret and hoping, praying that it would just go away. It didn't, it got so much worse. The tipping point came last Saturday. Liam and I were in his basement, a glorious cave of comfortable couches and posters from old movies. We were deep into a marathon session of some open-world video game, shouting at the screen and laughing, surrounded by the debris of a perfect afternoon, empty chip bags and soda cans. David had been upstairs, and eventually he came down carrying a fresh bowl of popcorn. "You two saving the world down here?" he asked, his smile looking completely benign. "We're trying," Liam shot back, not tearing his eyes from the screen. But a dragon is about to melt Anna's face. David chuckled and set the bowl on the coffee table. Liam, having maneuvered his character to a safe spot, hopped up. "I'm grabbing another soda. You want one?" he asked me. I nodded, and he bounded up the wooden basement stairs. The second his footsteps faded, the entire atmosphere of the room shifted. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with a new, unwelcome energy. David didn't go back upstairs. Instead, he walked over and sat on the couch next to me, not at the other end, but right next to me. So close that I could feel the heat radiating from his thigh, his knee a mere inch from my own. I subtly shifted away, trying to create space without making it obvious. He didn't seem to notice or care. He just watched me, a slow, deliberate smile spreading across his lips. It wasn't his usual warm, fatherly smile. This one was different. It was knowing. It was predatory. "You know," he began, his voice a low murmur that barely carried over the game's ambient music. "Liam is so lucky to have a friend like you. You're such a positive influence." "He's a great guy," I said, forcing my eyes to stay glued to the television screen, pretending to be fascinated by the game's pause menu. "He is," David agreed. "But you have a spark, a certain light. You're going to be a very impressive woman one day." He leaned in a fraction, and I was hit with the scent of his cologne, a sharp, woodsy fragrance that suddenly felt overpowering and cloying. "You're an incredibly beautiful young woman," he said, his gaze sweeping over my face, my neck, my shoulders. "The boys at your school must be fools not to see it." I forced a tight, strangled laugh. "I'm not really focused on that." He leaned even closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. a secret meant only for the two of us. "If I were 20 years younger," he said, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold, "I would be in serious, serious trouble around you." Time seemed to freeze. Every muscle in my body went rigid. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a clumsy compliment. The look in his eyes, the intimacy of his tone, it was all there. A blatant, undeniable confirmation of every twisted phone call, every strange text, every fear that had been churning in my gut for weeks. I wasn't crazy. This was real. My fight-or-flight response kicked into overdrive, and I chose flight. I have to use the bathroom," I stammered, scrambling up from the couch so quickly I nearly knocked over the bowl of popcorn. I didn't dare look at him as I fled up the stairs, my heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm. I locked myself in the upstairs guest bathroom and stared at my own reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with panic. What do you do? What in the world are you supposed to do in this situation? This was Liam's dad, the foundation of my social world. I splashed cold water on my face, gasping for air, trying to slow the frantic thudding in my chest. I felt violated and worse, completely and utterly trapped. I hid in that bathroom for as long as I could. When I finally emerged, my nerves shot. Liam was back on the couch, and David was in the kitchen, humming to himself as he loaded the dishwasher. He glanced over at me and offered a placid, innocent smile, as if he hadn't just shattered my entire sense of safety. I spent the rest of the afternoon on high alert, avoiding his gaze at all costs, and made my excuses to leave as early as humanly possible. The moment I was in my car, the wave of relief that washed over me was so intense it made me dizzy. I was safe. I was away from him, but then my phone buzzed. A new text message from David. "It was so nice talking with you today. You really are blossoming into a remarkable woman. We should do that more often." A wave of pure nausea rolled over me. He wasn't backing down. He was emboldened. Ignoring him wasn't working. It was just encouraging him. I didn't reply, but sleep was a lost cause that night. My mind was a torture chamber, replaying his words, his look, the feeling of being cornered in that basement. The next day at school, I could barely function. I avoided Liam, inventing a headache when he asked what was wrong. The secret was a physical weight, a stone in my chest making it hard to breathe. Every time I looked at him, I felt a pang of guilt and fear. Then, that afternoon, the situation escalated from deeply disturbing to genuinely terrifying. School let out, and I was walking through the student parking lot toward my beat-up old Honda. The sun was bright, students were laughing and shouting, and for a fleeting moment, the world felt normal. Then I saw it. Parked in a visitor's spot, right near the main exit where I'd have to pass, was David's silver SUV. My blood turned to ice. My first thought was denial. Maybe he was picking up Liam. But Liam had driven himself to school. I'd seen him leave 10 minutes earlier. Just as the denial began to crumble, he saw me. He raised a hand and gave a small, casual wave, a gesture that was the single most horrifying thing I had ever seen. He was waiting for me. He had come to my school, to my territory, and was waiting for me. I froze, my feet feeling like they were cemented to the asphalt. My mind was a chaotic storm of panic. Turn around, run back inside, pretend you forgot a book. But I knew it was futile. He would just call and text and call again. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a grim confirmation of my fears. I pulled it out with a trembling hand. The message was from him. "I see you. Let's talk for a minute." Every rational instinct in my body screamed at me to get in my car and speed away. But a dark, pragmatic thought pushed through the panic. What if I did run? What would he do then? Would he twist this, tell Liam I was being rude and strange? Would he paint me as the villain in a story I never wanted to be a part of? A desperate, reckless need to regain some control, to confront this and shut it down myself, took hold. With my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I forced my legs to move, walking toward his SUV. The passenger side window glided down with a soft whir as I approached. "Hey there," he said, that same soft, unsettling smile plastered on his face. "Hop in for a second. The AC is on." "I really need to get home," I said, my voice thin and strained. "It'll just take a minute," he insisted, his tone leaving no room for argument. He leaned across the console and pushed the passenger door open from the inside. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Feeling like I was walking into a predator's cage, I got in. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing me inside the small, claustrophobic space. The air was thick with the scent of his cologne. He turned in his seat, his body angled fully toward me, his presence overwhelming. "I don't understand why you're avoiding me, Anna," he began, his voice laced with a performer's hurt. "I thought we were friends. I thought you enjoyed our talks. Did I say something to offend you?" I took a shaky breath, summoning every ounce of courage I had. "David, with all due respect, the late-night calls, showing up at my school, it's not appropriate. You're my best friend's dad." He let out a soft, pitying sigh, as if I were a naive child who just didn't understand the complexities of the world. "I just value your perspective. Is that so wrong? You listen. You actually understand things. Liam is a great kid, but he's still a kid." "I think it needs to stop," I said, my voice gaining a fragile firmness. "The calls, the texts, all of it." Before I could say another word, he reached out and placed his hand on my knee. It was not a friendly or fatherly gesture. His fingers rested there, a dead weight of possession, and then his thumb began to stroke back and forth, a slow, deliberate motion against the denim of my jeans. I flinched as if I'd been struck by lightning. "You're so tense," he murmured, his eyes searching my face for a reaction. "There's no need to be nervous with me." That was it. That was the final line. I yanked my leg away and fumbled desperately for the door handle. "I have to go," I said, my voice cracking with a mixture of fear and rage. "This is wrong." I didn't wait for a response. I shoved the door open and practically fell out of the SUV, scrambling for the sanctuary of my own car a few feet away. I got in, locked the doors, and sat there for a full minute, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't fit the key into the ignition. I thought my heart was going to beat its way out of my chest. This wasn't just inappropriate anymore. This was predatory. This was dangerous. The fear finally gave way to a white-hot, clarifying anger. I was done being scared. I was done being silent. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen as I texted Liam. "We need to talk. It's an emergency. Seriously." He didn't reply for what felt like an eternity. I drove home on pure autopilot, the world outside my windshield a meaningless blur. I was done protecting him from this. I was done protecting David. This had gone too far. If telling the truth cost me my best friend, then so be it. My safety, my sanity, had to come first. Hours later, long after the sun had set and my room was cast in darkness, my phone finally rang. It was Liam. "Hey, what's up?" he asked, his voice casual and unconcerned. "You said it was an emergency. Everything okay?" I took a deep, steadying breath. The moment of truth had arrived. The air in my room felt thin, hard to draw into my lungs. "No," I said, my voice low and serious, devoid of any of its usual warmth. "No, Liam, nothing is okay. It's about your dad." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. A long, heavy, crushing silence that stretched for an eternity. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. I braced myself for yelling, for disbelief, for the click of him hanging up on me forever. Then, finally, he spoke. His voice was completely flat, devoid of any emotion, and colder than I had ever heard it in all the years I'd known him. "You need to come over," he said, "right now."